Hello, and welcome to PremierTV. I'm Jill Jacinto, the Mercer Premier Digital Platform Manager. On today's Premier Talk, we are joined again by Antonis Christidis, partner at Mercer. Antonis joined us last month for his first live stream in this three-part series. Today, we're going to talk about the future of work and how you can access and acquire top talent. Antonis will share insights from Mercer's and Oliver Wyman's research on open source talent. Thank you so much for joining us, Antonis.
Hello, Jill. Thank you, everyone. Happy to be here again. What I'm going to do in the next maybe 10, 15 minutes, I just want to share some ideas about how we could be rethinking, let's call it workforce composition. So if you think about it, the environment out there is changing very fast. New ideas, new skills, things are happening. Yet the workforce and how we are organized to address this changing environment is, I would say, rather a static environment. So our workforce, there is some type of change that we get through natural attrition and recruitment, but at the core is a quite static type of setup. Now the question is, are there ways we can make that static setup a little bit more dynamic and a little bit more aligned to what's happening out there? And if there are ways, how. So I think this is the core idea of what I would like to discuss with you today. And I'm going to do three things. I'm going to say, first, a little bit of why this is interesting and important. And in my mind, as we move forward into the future, it will be becoming more and more important. Maybe now some of these ideas are maybe a little bit a few years down the road, but I think it's important to communicate them now. So why? The second part is, how can we then do that? And the third one is, what are the challenges we face? Already we have organizations we work with that we're experimenting with some of these ideas. And, we keep bumping into challenges that are important, I think, for people to hear and have in their mind if they're willing to explore this type of practices. So with that in mind, let me just share some. So I think the why part is really straightforward in my mind. I think if you think about it, the more diversity of ideas in an organization will probably naturally lead to more innovation. The more we have people with different ideas, different mindsets, different experiences, the more innovation, the more creative interactions you're going to have that will lead to something hopefully better moving forward. If we think about it the way we do this today, the workforce, you join a company, you get onboarded, you start embracing the culture. By the way, these are all very important things. We're not suggesting that companies should stop do that and move to what we're going to be proposing. I think it's both sides of the equation that have to adapt. But generally, over a period of time, we get settled in the way things get done in an organization. And I think then we apply these lenses to everything we see around us. And then sometimes this creates, I would say, a false sense of security. If we basically could continue this flow of talent, people, ideas through an organization, I think we would be ending up in a more innovative, more open-minded type of environment. The second reason I think this is important, I think apart from ideas, just diversity of people will help organizations adapt faster to change. So just having more types of people than just the prototype of employee we generally tended to recruit. If we were a bank, we tend to recruit banking type of people. If we're a consulting company, we tend to recruit, from these schools, with these backgrounds, with this. I think more diversity will lead to faster adaptation. The change that is happening outside the organization is exponential and it's multi-layered. So we need to have this multi-layer type of workforce to respond to it. And it's not necessarily that, of course, we can always hire these people in. So again, we're going to look a little bit in the idea of how we could create that velocity of ideas and people around the organization without necessarily. And the third thing I would say is that, at the core of it, there's also a faster change of pace on how skills are required. Look at technology skills, but also cognitive skills and behavioral skills. I think there was always evolution, but there was always change. It's not something new. But I think we all agree that the more we move towards the future, the more this becomes faster, that turnover of skills, which means that, how much can we always train people internally to adapt to this, and when does come the time that maybe training, it's important, but, for what type of skills we will train, what type of skills we'll say maybe they're not that core and we're going to have to rethink. So these are three reasons that I think are very important in companies to rethink how we can make a predominantly static environment, which is the workforce, a little bit more dynamic. And let's now go and move to the how part. On the how part, I'll talk about two things. I'll talk first of all about internal velocity of skills and ideas and people, and then I'll talk about external, because they're both parts of the equation, again, I think are very important. At the core, the ideas we're discussing in our paper is a foundational rethinking of how we access skills and experience. If you think today, we access this by having jobs, and then we put people into, say, okay, here's a job that we need to be done, and this job generally is a set of accountabilities, which is outputs, which is matched to a set of skills, which is inputs and experiences. And then we go and we hire for these jobs. Okay, we need somebody with these skills and experiences who are going to come in and they're going to deliver to this job. I think as we move into the future, we're going to have three layers, not this one layer. We're of course going to have, let's call it the solid core. Of course, we're going to have people who are going to be full-time employees in specific jobs, matching their specific skills and experiences towards specific outcomes. This can be either because these jobs have data security requirements, and you don't want a lot of velocity of people around, areas that have data security issues. You need to make sure that you can contain this type of environments, or because something is core competence to the business, so you need to own always this skill and make sure that it evolves with your business. Or I would call it generally around the business type of environment. Things that we're running the business is not so much. I'm not going to speak about this first layer because this is the solid core and this is what most companies are made of today. But then there will be what we like to talk about, the agile periphery. So around this solid core, which maybe it's 20, 30, 40, 50% of today's total workforce, which is the core, we already see companies building an agile periphery. This is usually a marketplace, an internal marketplace, where skills and experiences meet projects and tasks. So if you think about it, today I have a job and I have a set of skills, and my set of skills aligns to my job, and I am, let's say, restricted by delivering to this job. But probably my personal set of skills and experiences is way broader than what my job asks me to do. If I had an environment that I didn't have to deliver to my job description every day, but actually I could look at stuff that are happening within Mercer, within the Mercer McLennan company, and maybe even my employer doesn't even know I have the skills because it's stuff I do outside, and I could go and align myself to these projects and or these tasks. Actually, my company would make a much higher return on my skill set because today they utilize my skill set in terms of my job, but in that future, I could be doing way more things beyond just the core skill set that the company assumes I have. So this is basically what we generally these days talk about, an internal gig marketplace. I mean, you have different words, but this is applying marketplace principles within the boundaries of the organization to enable people who are within the organization, full-time employees, to better align their aspirations and their skills to the work they want to be doing. All right. So that will create an agile periphery. And that will be interesting, of course, because not only the organization will get a higher return because we're going to have access to the full skill set of our employees, but hopefully the employees will also find it more interesting to work for a company that allows them to do these things that you don't have every day to do the same. And then the third layer, so solid core, agile periphery, the third layer will be what we call the talent ecosystem. So this is now moving externally outside the organization. Already every organization today has external relationships. We use, relationships with universities, with consultants, vendors, all these things. But I think today is more of an ad hoc basis. A company says, I need this, let's find a vendor, let's find a contractor. I think that whole talent ecosystem by design is already on the rise, and it will be more and more on the rise, which is how do we create an environment around that internal workforce to help our internal workforce, interact with more people externally by design, not just by chance. For example, we see a rise right now a lot in the use of talent swaps. So, companies sending talent, sending their people maybe to consulting companies, and consulting companies swapping and sending some consultants to work full-time within the client environment. And that cross-fertilization, let's call it, type of situation creates both new ideas on both parts. but also moving forward creates better understanding of both parts of each other. So, using talent swaps to move talent around is one way to create more velocity around. But generally, I would say beyond that, swapping talent and all that, there's another marketplace opportunity here. I spoke before about the internal marketplace. There's another opportunity, which is now setting up an external marketplace. I usually use Uber as a basic example. If you think about it, Uber is a marketplace of on the one side, there's drivers, people who offer transportation services. And on the other end, there is people who need transportation services. And basically, as long as you're in an area and you click on your app, the system sends out a request to all people around you that have been pre-verified and they have been pre-approved that they actually are drivers and they're not serial killers and they can take you from point A to point B. And basically, you get the service. The same idea we see a lot now already being applied using different technologies. We make reference to some of these technologies in our paper for other types of jobs. You may need a designer, you may need a developer, you may need a marketeer, you may need a technical writer, you may need an electrician or a plumber, if you are, how can you can use these technologies to curate these ecosystems and these talent pools proactively, not now so proactively we curate, and then through technology, access them on demand. So this is basically, I would call it the external side of the marketplace I was speaking before. And this completes the equation. So the internal marketplace allows you to better utilize skills of your internal employees. The external marketplace allows you to better meet needs that maybe are not non-core, or you want to put some people next to your people and this cross-fertilization period. And it allows you to do it in a very predictable and in a very consistent way. Because in the past, we could do that, but without the technology that we have today, you always had to go and find somebody, etc. Jill, I'm talking too much, so I'm going to stop here before I go to the third part and speak about the challenges we see in setting up internal marketplaces and external marketplaces, and say if you have any question or if there's anything you would like me to discuss in more detail.
No, I think that's very interesting. I don't see any questions coming in yet, but I think that's very helpful in terms of knowing the differences between the internal and the external, of how everything really is an ecosystem. It's cohesive.
So let me move to the last part, and let me speak about the challenges we see. So the idea of setting up internal marketplaces or external marketplaces for organizations to interact with talent, as I said, I think in the last 2 to 3 years, they became more mainstream. And in the last maybe year, we see more companies experimenting. Usually I have to say, before I go and move to the challenges, that it's not a very good idea to do these tests or these experiments across the whole organization at once. It's always a good idea to pick up smaller parts of the business that have specific characteristics and start running pilots. Take one department of a specific nature, turn it into a marketplace, see what happens. Curate a specific talent pool of people and then create that connection to the core business and then start accessing the external talent in that way. So there's this idea of pilot is something we work a lot with, because if you can do it across the organization at once, there will be So as we do that, we see a few interesting challenges that are arising. Let me start with internal marketplaces, because some of the challenges we see there, all right, some of the challenges we see there, some background noise. So some of the challenges we see there are challenges that we didn't really expect, actually, when we started doing it. So for example, so imagine that you now set up an internal marketplace, which means that people that before had a job and they were allocated to a department, and that department had a budget and for payroll and everything was connected in terms of accounting, no longer actually operate that way. You have people who basically come to work every day and they go online on your marketplace technology, and they can look for work anywhere in the organization, and they can pitch for that work like you would do as a consultant, or you can apply for that work like you would do as a new hire. And then through this technology, people are matched to work, and most of the time they will work on their desktop. So suddenly we have a problem that the connection between headcount, cost, and budget is not direct anymore, because you may have somebody who sits in department A but now does a lot of work for other departments. The questions we're now getting a lot for accounting departments is, how do we code for this cost? Who pays for this cost? Why should this department pay for this cost if that person no longer full-time works for that department? So that's one area, the whole accounting treatment. And again, I don't think we have a silver and this is like the answer of how you do it. I think every organization has a different way to manage this accounting and payroll costs. But that was something unexpected, I would say, when we started in this work. The second area that is interesting to consider is how middle managers, in a way, could become blockers. Again, it depends how open-minded or how you prepare them for this environment. But if you just implement a marketplace without any other preparation of your middle management core, some of people in this layer generally may start feeling a little bit, let's call it, stressed about it. Because if you think about it, the middle manager typically, now oversimplify now, but typically is around allocating work and controlling outputs of people in the team. So it's about work allocation and controlling outputs and making sure things are happening. If suddenly you say, you had a team, but now your team members don't really work for you and they can actually go and do whatever they like and they can find different things in the organization, suddenly you start having existential type of questions. What is my role? Why am I here? Will I have a role 5 years down the road, 3 years down the road? If a technology takes over matching people to jobs, work allocation, and if again all the outputs are delivered in the technology and you can do all your assessment of the deliverables in there, what am I here for? So I think that whole mindset shift and the way we approach what middle management is about is a second layer. And if we don't do that very often, this becomes a blocker. So something that was a good idea actually doesn't deliver as planned.
Yeah. Question on that. So let's say the flip side. What if there's resistance from the worker who's really used to being in that tunnel of, okay, this is my job description, and doesn't want to break out of that? What's the change management there to make sure that they're adapting and they're growing?
The issue there is that when you implement this type of marketplaces, you're not going to force anybody to leave their job. And actually, I'll tell you what is another challenge, because you mentioned that. You're not going to force anybody to leave their job and start applying for job. You can say, if you're an account, you can continue doing your core job, or you can start looking for other stuff. One of the problems we see sometimes is that companies implement the technology without addressing these other implications. And although when they initially communicate to employees that we're going to be doing that, there's generally a positive reaction because employees understand that they can complement what they do at the core job with something more interesting and meet more people and see more things. In the end, they end up not really using it because they don't really have time. The core job takes so many hours of work that actually, okay, it's nice that I can bid for more work, but actually I have more than enough work in what I'm expected here. So it's not so much that we see employees resisting because I'm sure they exist, but because there's a mindset shift. But it's really because, how do we reallocate the whole organization? How do we redesign the whole thing so we actually create time? Now, there is one part that has to do with the employee. And it's good that you mentioned that, which is the part of performance management. So it's not only about time. Okay, so I don't have time. How do I do all this? But the other part is really, okay, if let's say I'm an employee and I really want to do this, and I report to my manager like I was doing before, and that person is responsible for my performance management type of process and annual review. And suddenly I now start applying for work around the organization, and will this be accounted in my performance review? Is this part of my bonus allocation? Does it impact the way my manager views me? So again, what I'm trying to say here is that there's two aspects to setting up an internal marketplace. One aspect is you need to have a core technology that does this. There's lots of technologies in the market that basically will match people's skills, experiences to work. Yeah. But if you just focus on the technology aspect, we already discussed about 4 or 5, in my mind, way more complex situations that actually will make technology not deliver. Now, if you look at these other 5, 6 different things, performance management, the role of middle managers, time allocation, accounting, suddenly that core technology aspect here becomes very interesting because over time, again, it will take some time, but over time, people start embracing it and the benefits become clear. Employees actually have a more interesting day-to-day life in the organization. Imagine every day you can come in and say, oh, what is up there? What is going on? And you go and you see projects that are posted live from people all over the organization. And of course, for the company, because as I said before, the company now starts utilizing the full skill set. So these are the benefits. So these are the challenges we see there. And as you saw, none of the challenges had to do, in my view, from core technology. I think the technologies out there that are focused in this area actually have developed quite nicely, and the matching algorithms can do quite some very amazing things today to match, people to this job. If I look at the external marketplace, just to move on and for our time we have allocated for this webinar today, if I look at the external marketplace, again, we see generally three problems. The first challenge is a very obvious one. I think most of the people listening to this and who are familiar with working with external employees will probably have it in mind, is the whole area of regulation, co-employment. How do you set up environments that as you start bringing people in, you can demonstrate, should that this is the case, that you don't apply any behavioral and financial controls on these employees. If you have external workers coming in to work for you, it's very important, based on US regulation, that the employer or their employer you are renting, let's say, their skills, cannot dictate the behavioral aspects of how work is done, and they cannot financially control this employer. So this already creates a set of rules and guidelines that have to be in place to make sure that we can bring these people in and don't create legal risks. It also creates another learning curve for our managers and internal employees on helping them understand how they should interact with these employers. And today, maybe it's straightforward because we don't have so many. Usually it's like specific consulting companies that may come in. But if companies are embracing this more and more diverse workforce composition, actually training our people on how you should interact with external workers versus internal workers and what are the differences is very important, because we don't want to get to surprises in the legal way. And then there is two other type of challenges. Of course, one is the culture match challenge. You can bring somebody in that has all the right skill sets to deploy them in a rapid type of project that you need some work. But how do we make sure that the cultural aspect of this employee can match? And again, I'm not saying that it always has to be 100% match, because a little bit of the benefit of bringing externals is actually that you can, tick a little bit the core culture that we have and maybe change a little bit. But certainly making sure that people can work together is very important. And today, most of the marketplaces focus on your credentials. They focus on your skill sets, what you have to offer. I think there is some work to be done to say, okay, how can we predict in a way good matches and how we deploy? And then the third thing is a rethinking of onboarding, offboarding process. So typically, most companies today have a standard onboarding process for bringing in new full-time employees. It's very well defined, and I think we also have some amazing technology in this space these days that helps us do more. But when you bring somebody for a short project, for a once-off gig, that onboarding and offboarding is very important, but it's very different, and it's not necessarily a core competence that most HR departments have today. So if I summarize, and I'll stop with that, in the internal side, there's challenges in the area of accounting, which is like admin type of challenges. There's challenges in the area of mindset, like the middle management layer, and there's challenges in the area of performance management. How does this all add up together? In the external side, we see the regulation as number one. Of course, you don't want to create something that actually creates risk for the organization. And then there is something about culture and rapid onboarding, offboarding that we have to have in our mind. Jill, that's all I had to share for today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I know the folks at home are appreciating it as well. That was excellent, and we're so excited they were able to join us again for the second part of this series. Thank you to those tuning in for joining us on PremierTV, where global perspectives are delivered by leading experts. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and encourage you to continue the discussion by adding your thoughts and questions in the comment thread below. Log on to the Premier platform next month to watch the next session in this series regarding agile organizations and internal marketplaces. And if you didn't catch our initial video, future of work, evolution of skills, you can see that also on the right-hand side of the page as well. So please tune in to other Premier panels, interviews, and fireside chats, in addition to this series, to learn firsthand what new opportunities are on the horizon for your organization today. As a reminder, you can access all episodes of Premier TV on the digital platform. Thank you, and thank you again, Antonis.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.